Elevated conversation not only satisfies, it sanctifies. Now forgive me, I'm new to the classroom this year, so I'm still learning how this whole teaching thing works. But from what I understand, repetition is the mother of all learning. So repeat after me. Elevated conversation not only satisfies, it sanctifies. Now those are some pretty fancy words. I'll explain them in just a minute. But before I was in education, I was actually a missionary. When I wasn't on the road, traveling the world and having the gift of meeting young people like you and helping them grow in the faith, I was an entrepreneur living in Nashville. That's what I did in all my free time. So I read a lot of marketing books. And there's a particular marketing strategy. It's called surprise and delight. And they say that it actually increases brand engagement, customer loyalty. You're going to go in and purchase more often every single time if occasionally the marketing of a good company surprises you. So much to my delight, but much to one of your surprises, in a moment I'm going to call one of you up to read an excerpt of an email I received a few weeks ago. That thing will further explain what I mean by this idea of elevated conversation. Let's break it down first. Elevated. It implies something above what you're used to. Sort of an intentional conversation. Something about, let's say, topics that actually matter. Faith, culture. Stuff that actually has some level of even eternal significance. If you've been on a great retreat since you've been a Jesuit and you've had a solid peer ministry, you've had elevated conversations in your small group. If you've ever come into campus ministry for lunch discipleship, the same kind of elevated conversations have unfolded. What most of us don't realize is those kind of conversations are very hard to come by. We're kind of used to them around here, at least in particular moments and environments. But the world doesn't experience this very often. You might have noticed this, but there's a lot of anger and division out there. There's also a lot of noise and shallowness. So elevated conversation, it satisfies our soul, reminds us that we're made for something bigger than ourselves, something bigger than this world. But it not only has the power to satisfy, but even sanctify, to make us more like Christ, to make us, we'll say, holy, at least holy enough to inspire other people sometimes, which is what this email is all about. So back to surprise and delight marketing. I'm hopeful that Jake Killian is here today. Jake, come on up. Jake's an example of somebody who was not only on a pilgrimage a few weeks ago, but he's been involved in lunch discipleship the last couple of years. I thought about messaging him this morning to make sure he'd be here, but he wasn't expecting this. He's going to appreciate reading this about as much as anybody because it was actually an email written to him and 9 other Jesuit students by a professor at Penn State who overheard an elevated conversation at Ristorante Abruzzi while we were on pilgrimage in Rome only a few weeks ago. It's so amazing because he overheard this conversation and then offered to pay for our dinner. Now, 10 high school boys eating dinner in Rome is not exactly a cheap date, but he decided to pay for all of us. The next day, he sent an email to Father Hermes and Mr. Shikatano explaining how much that conversation that he overheard inspired him, how much it actually helped him grow in his own faith and identify his own shortcomings. Because again, the conversation was so elevated. It was so intentional, at times even quite vulnerable. Well, about a day later, he sent this email to me and asked me to pass it along to the boys. So I'm gonna let one of those guys read it right now.
Buongiorno, my Tampa Jesuit friends. I wanted to take a moment to thank you on 2 accounts. First, for the uplifting conversation I happened to overhear during dinner at Ristorante Abruzzi. I tried not to eavesdrop, but it was difficult given how small and quiet the room was. And second, at Sunday's Mass at Santa Maria Maggiore. I was surprised and excited to see the seats around me populate with the all-blue tiger shirts just prior to the start of Mass. I was extremely thankful after Mass that each of you took the time to find me and say hello. And thanks too for the prayers that you have offered on my behalf. I can't express enough how much I appreciate that. Although our encounters have been brief, they have been supercharged and were truly the highlight of my trip to Rome. You all were an impressive group of young men and have great leadership with the faculty and staff at Jesuit. It wasn't hard to figure out how God is working with each of you, and my being able to listen to your dinner conversation. Life is going to be filled with a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes you are going to be called upon to do difficult things. So while it sometimes may not yet be apparent, the grounding in faith that each of you has will give you the strength, courage, and wisdom to not be afraid of those challenges. God bless you, and keep up with the great work at Jesuit Tampa. Dave Wozniak.
We should probably get a tiger clap for Jake Keeling. 1, 2, 3. No one's ever told me to come up here without but 3 seconds notice, so well done, Jake. The element of surprise has hopefully kept all of you tuned in this morning, because who you are and who you're becoming makes a difference in this world. And the kind of elevated conversations that you're capable of because of the sort of formation you receive here at Jesuit is heard by others. It inspires others. Dave Wozniak is one example. He'll actually be on campus later this winter. Unfortunately, he's a Phillies fan. But fortunately, that means he's going to be here, probably to give Convocation at some point, to share a little bit more in person what you have meant to him, even though he's only met 10 of you at Ristorante Abruzzi in Rome, Italy, a few weeks ago. Yesterday, I received an email from a missionary in Europe who encountered many of our guys at this Carthusian monastery in Gaming. Similarly, he went on and on and on about how good you are. And more than good, he perceived something of God's holiness in you. As recently as Friday, I talked to Miss Mack, the front desk. She was actually at the football game Friday night. She said, Mr. Mitchell, when I was at campus ministry a few days ago, dropping off something during lunch, I wanted to linger. I wanted to eavesdrop. The level of conversation that y'all were having in there was unlike anything I've ever heard before. Know the great power that you have, gentlemen, in your witness, in your intentionality, and in your willingness to go deeper and to aim a little higher. Whether that's the conversation you have at the lunch table today, whether it's the retreat that you're going to lead as a pew minister, or even the discipleship group that you're going to join this year. 2 very practical notes to conclude on. The first, you'll never be capable of elevated conversation unless you have a great depth of soul. So what if at the end of lunch today you came into this chapel for 2 minutes? And spent those 2 minutes in silence before the Eucharistic Lord, asking Him to speak to your heart. Give you a little bit of that peace and that joy and that depth of soul to go on for. And what if you did that every single day for this entire school year? 2 minutes of silence in front of the Blessed Sacrament. At the end of lunch, when you waited for the period, 6th period class, it would make all the difference in the world. The other practical suggestion is if you're a senior coming to lunch, you can't see you today. If you're a junior tomorrow, if you're a sophomore Thursday, if you're a freshman Friday, and I'll be there with them for lunch discipleship every single week this school year. Elevating intentional conversation about things that actually matter. Again, not only satisfies, it sanctifies. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for sending your word among us, Jesus himself, inviting us into a great and epic dialogue with you through our lives of prayer. Help us to go deeper, to take not only our prayer lives to the next level, but our brotherhood as well. To aim even higher in our conversations, in our shared pursuit of virtue. God, help us to become great saints together through Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.